on the 22nd of January 2024. I'll now move on to today's agenda. Item number 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies registered?
DCFO Derry Rose.
Right. Okay, that's all. Councillor
I'm Paul Davis.
Right. Thank you. Item number 2 is declaration of interests. The Fire and Rescue Authority are reminded of their personal responsibility to both verbally and in writing declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect to matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government Act 2020. Oh, I don't know what that is. 2000, is it?
2000.
Yeah. No, I got an extra bit here. The Fire and Rescue Authority standing orders and the Members' Code of Conduct. Does any member wish to make any declaration? No? No? Okay, that's fine. Item number 3 is Chairperson's announcements, and you'll be relieved to know I have no announcements to make today. Now, item number 4, we will now have the minutes of the following meetings. The first being held on the 3rd of July, which is the minutes of this meeting that could not be agreed on the 16th of October due to the 16th of October meeting being incorrect. So I will go through them page by page. This is the one for the 3rd of July, which is page 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I will remove these minutes as a true record. Can I have a second then? Did you want to raise something? Sorry.
No, happy to second, and no issue with the minutes, but wondered if now would be a good time if we could have an update on, it's the second paragraph on page 10. It was a question with regard to whether the recent, or it's not so recent now, the pay awards had been anyone who retired prior to the pay awards and they were backdated pay awards, whether their pensions had been uprated in line with those.
This won't appear further on in the agenda.
No,
I don't think so.
That's fine.
No, it's probably an opportunity to bring Catherine into the conversation, because I know that the team there were working towards implementing the pay award and reviewing what the implications were from a pension perspective. Catherine, are you able to give a bit of an update on this item?
Yes, so we have received updated pay information from our colleagues down in South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. We are aiming to work on them. We haven't worked on them yet because we've been concentrating on paying benefits to those who are retiring now. With McLeod coming in October, we did have a bit of a blip with our admin where things were taking us a little longer than we would normally like, just by those processes embedded. Now we're up and running with those processes. It does give us the opportunity to go back and look at those backdated pay increases. So the answer is no, we haven't yet, but we have had the information from South Wales Fire and Rescue to do that, because what we've got to do is look at the McLeod remedy for those people. We've got to look at the backdated pay increase award for those people. So they are quite significant pieces of work on an individual basis. But like I say, we have had the data from Fire, but we haven't done them yet.
Do you want raise anything further?
No, that's great, thank you.
Covered it.
Yeah, that's covered it. And just for my understanding, I guess, there is the potential for people to need to have an upward adjustment made to their pensions if they retired prior to the pay awards being settled, and then those pay awards were retrospectively implemented.
Yeah, so effectively we have to recalculate from scratch the benefits that have been put into payment, but we also need to look at individuals' tax circumstances as well, because some of those pay increases then knock onto that increase in their pension benefits, which could then knock onto tax. So yes, so they will get uprated, but there's a whole piece of work around each individual.
Thank you very much.
The next item is the minutes that we took.
Excuse me, Chair, I'm sorry for interrupting. I noticed that I was absent.
Yeah.
I do apologise. I normally give my apologies.
Right.
So I don't know where I was, and I apologise that I didn't give my apologies
Don't worry about it.
Not
These
like
things
me.
do happen, don't
Yes,
they?
it's not like me.
Yeah. No, it's not, is it? Anyway, on page number 11 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October, which was unfortunately in Cora. So we took notes for the minutes, so I'll just go through page by page. Page 11.
Chair, there's an amendment needed to the absent individual, which I think should be P Davis.
Well, okay.
So we'll make that amendment.
Right. Right, page 11, 12, 13, 14. Obviously, we couldn't agree these minutes, so I would just move that they be noted.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank heavens for Cora today.
I agree.
Right, the next item is reports with decision. And the first one is 5A, which is the review of the key performance indicators, the first 4 periods, April 2023 to August 2023. I don't know who's taking us through that. Is he in? Catherine? Oh, Catherine? Right, okay.
Okay, sorry, I'm just getting to the right page. So the 3 tables show our ongoing performance against our agreed key performance indicators. So we are maintaining those KPIs. We have missed target on 2 deferreds coming into payment. Our KPI aim is 5 working days. However, we completed 1 in 6 days and 1 8 days. So even though we did miss target, there wasn't a significant delays to those, and that would have been down to pure work volumes around the time of October 23 and new processes embedding. But like I said, those processes are bedding in now, which is allowing us to process benefits much quicker than we were around October. We continue to work together closely with the pension staff at South Wales Fire and Rescue over data collection and working around who is coming up to retirement and who they want benefits packs for, in what order. But we do have a very close and good working relationship with our colleagues down in South Wales Fire and Rescues. So as those processes bed in, what we'll look to do now is train and expand the knowledge in the team so that going forward we can deal with we have more people with those skills within the team. We continue to engage with our software provider. As you can imagine, this remedy implication is a big undertaking for our software provider. So we have taken on what we call testing working parties, where they give us releases to the software, but we've actually had them early so we can test them to make sure that we're happy with them before they get released to the whole of the country. So everybody working in fire admin. So we do that and then feedback our errors, but it does afford us the opportunity of identifying anything in the first instance and feeding back. We continue to attend local government association updates and we communicate with Welsh local government as well around pension matters to ensure that, even though, because the local government association sort of routine webinars are very English focused, so we may always make sure that we're being compliant with the Welsh regulations as well, because there are slight differences. So just to make sure that we are compliant with the Welsh regulations and we're not just following the English. My pension online stats, these are increasing and is one of our targets across the section, both for our local government members and our fire members. As we see this as a great way of communicating with our members. It allows members to send us documents, we send documents to them. It's much quicker with postal delays, etc. at the moment, and people can access their benefits online and have a look at their benefits and update nominations and personal details as and when appropriate. Since these meeting notes were pulled together, I just wanted to give you an update as well. By the end of January each year, we have to provide data to HMRC on an event report. HMRC ask all pension funds to let them know of certain notifiable events. So the events to do around taxation, so the main ones for the fire scheme are members who've had unauthorised payments, so have had commutation in excess of 25% of the value of their benefits, or members who've had lifetime allowance protection and protections or benefits in excess of lifetime allowance, had tax charges and annual allowance. So we've provided all that data to South Wales Fire and Rescue for them to be able to submit that event report to time by the end of January this year. One of our big pieces of work ongoing at the moment is looking at the tax position for members who've following rollback. So we've got some members who are coming up to retirement who benefits will have been rolled back into the legacy scheme, but because of their tax position at the time and now, the tax position with regards to the pension benefits will have changed. So we're looking at that, and that's quite a big piece of work. There's some tools that HMRC have put out for individual members to be able to use to look at their tax position. And there's also what they're calling a secure data exchange service. So once the individual's gone through and determined their own individual tax situation, we, as the administrators and South Wales Fire, as the scheme managers, will get notified of whether there's been an underpayment or an overpayment of tax, and what we have to do accordingly to rectify that situation for the individual member. So we're looking at the first ones of those coming through at the moment. So yeah, lots of time spent looking at HMRC manuals at the moment to make sure we get it right for people. On the back of that, we're also looking at how we communicate that information to our members and communicate the availability of these tools for members to rectify their own tax situations. So we're looking at that at the moment and prepared some drafts last week and shared them with our South Wales Fire and Rescue colleagues so that they can communicate to members as well. I was going to give you an update on dashboard. I think last time I came down, I was explaining about the dashboard program, now the national program where individuals be able to go online and access all their pension benefits. And South Wales Fire and Rescue Service will have a duty to allow firefighters access to their data so that when they log onto the portal, that they will see this information coming through. So we've now had an onboarding date. All schemes must onboard by October 26, and we're expecting public service, and it's not been confirmed yet, to be October 25. So by that date, we will have to ensure that members can A, find their data, and B, look at what they call the value data on the system. So we'll work again with our software provider, who will be our link between the member and the dashboard. They'll work like, it's almost like a switchboard with a link in with us. So that's obviously on our radar from a local government point of view as well. So we'll pick that up and we'll obviously deal with that as and when there'll be a project plan. We'll have to look at that. I think it has been mentioned as well that this should be on risk registers going forward, because it's a significant piece of work. Yeah. Last week we've also had notification that there's a new pensions regulator single governance code being issued. It was laid before Parliament last week, and we're expecting that to be in force towards the end of March of this year. Now, we've been expecting this for a number of years, but with COVID and McLeod, it's sort of been kicked down the line a little bit. So we've got a piece of work to look at that and identify where we've got any gaps, if any, and how we address them within the section. But again, whether that's something you need to consider as from a board point of view around risk. So we've got some webinars coming up as well, which will update us. Our fund actuary is actually running some webinars that we're going to attend to ensure that we understand the implications of the introduction of this code and how we move forward. We're also working on a template immediate choice remedial service statement. So these are for individuals who have retired in the remedy period, and they will each get a statement giving them details of the benefits they have got and what they could have if they, well, rolled back and new scheme benefits. So I'm working with colleagues in Dyfed Pension Fund who deal with North, Mid and West to ensure that that statement is Welsh compliant. So I'm dealing with that at the moment and linking in with Kim as well, who's linking in with the Scheme Advisory Board to make sure that it is Welsh compliant, that statement. And then once that statement's been agreed across Wales, we'll then look at a project as to how we prioritise who we're going to contact first. And then the data scores, we put in the meeting notes as well. So the data scores, so each year we have to report to the pensions regulator and we submit an annual return. So that outlines details of who's on the board, and they also ask for data scores. So there's two sets of scores, common data scores and scheme specific data scores. Now your common data scores are things like your national insurance number, your name, your address, those pieces of data that would be applicable for everybody across any pension scheme. And then you've got scheme specific data scores, which are pay, service. They're scheme specific depending on the design of the scheme. So our scores for these, we monitor these routinely. So the papers show the scores for the 3 schemes, and they've been submitted to the pensions regulator, and that was done in time as well. Okay, I think that was everything, unless anybody's got any questions.
Anybody wish to raise any questions? You had your hand up, did you?
It's been answered.
All right, okay.
Just again.
Right, so our recommendations are that 1, that members of the local pension board note the performance data included in Appendix 1 attached to the report. 2, that members note the relevant pension administrative overview and update included in Appendix 2 attached to the report. I will move this, and can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Right then, we will now move on to 5B, which is a review of the key performance indicator, which covers the period April 23 to November 2023, which is a bit strange because we've already done one. Anyway, I'll hand back to Catherine.
Yeah, they are the tables that we referred to. So the key performance indicators.
I think.
Yeah, is there anything more to cover, Catherine? I think
No, sorry. Have I jumped around?
They went on to November, and I was wondering.
Oh, sorry.
Sure. No, nobody wants to raise anything?
No, and I think Catherine gave an explanation for on page 32 and 34, there's a 50% achievement of target and a 0%. I think it was in the November time.
Yeah.
But I think you give an explanation of that, Catherine.
Well, fine, I thought you covered quite a bit.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much, Catherine. Right, we move on to item number 6, which is reports for information, which is the local pension board risk register. I now hand over to Alison.
Thank you, Chair. So this report came to board last time, but obviously we couldn't agree the recommendations because we weren't correct. So by way of an introduction, just to confirm that as a pension board, we should really be discussing our risks through the formatting risk register. It is good practice for pension boards and was highlighted in the AGM that was held last December, that was led by the Local Government Association. The report suggests that we, in the meeting, agree today that we're happy to proceed with the development of a risk register, with a view to us convening either after the meeting today or at a future date a short workshop where we will discuss what we think should be included in our risk register. So if you're happy, I think for today I am looking for your agreement to 1, that we should have a risk register, and 2, that we should start to develop
As soon as possible.
as soon as we
Yeah, I agree with that.
You know, because
The meeting is fine with me.
okay, because we were supposed to be talking about this last October.
Yes,
right.
We're now 3 months down the
Yes.
line, we need to get it
Yes.
sorted out quickly.
Yeah,
I will
agree.
move that.
Yeah,
definitely.
I agree with you.
Everybody
Okay.
support that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Right, the next one is item number 7, which is a verbal update report on the scheme advisory board. which I think Alison will take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. So I think a couple of headlines for us just to be aware of by way of updates from the last Scheme Advisory Board for Wales meeting that was held on the 2nd of November. As a board, there was discussion around the consultations that were out, and these related to O'Brien in particular. An update on O'Brien for members to be aware. Wales will be implementing the new legislation from the 1st of February, so that's the 1st of next month, not prior to that. I think we're a couple of months behind England. You later legislation, I think, towards the end of last year. So by way of an update, that will now change from the 1st of February. The pensions team have already started the work on O'Brien, slightly ahead of the curve as part of our preparations. So they have been communicating with members. I'll say a bit more as we cover the next report. But I think one of the other headlines from the SARB meeting in November was that GAD, the Government Actuaries Department, joined the meeting. And they presented their assumptions around what sort of the likelihood of contribution rates are looking like going forward. As you will know, they make their assumptions on that there's a set of factors that they use. These include things like mortality after retirement, retirement ages, promotional pay increases, mortality before retirement, and family statistics. What they said in the meeting was all of these things are driving towards a position of an increased employer contribution rate that is likely to come into force effective April 24. Now, we haven't had confirmation that this is happening as yet. I'm just going to check with the Treasurer to see if he's had any confirmation. So this was a sort of direction of travel that GAD were indicating was likely to happen, but we haven't had confirmation that that is going to be the case.
And time is moving on, isn't it?
It is moving on, but I guess these things have to be signed off by the Treasury and other government departments, so it may well be sort of working itself through the system at the moment. So it's I guess one for us to be aware of, and you know, obviously we will alert you as soon as we know what the position looks like. The knock-on effect of O'Brien, which was also discussed in the meeting, is if there's a higher take-up than perhaps initially thought on O'Brien, that would also impact contribution rates. So yeah, it's all in the mix at the moment. So we'll just have to keep a watching brief on that one. So yeah, I think that's probably the headline from the meeting. I don't know if there's anything else, Chris, that you think should
No,
be covered off.
I don't think there's anything else. I mean, just a complete conversation on that point. It's not specifically for the board, but just as background information. As Al's mentioned, the indications are that from the GAD report that contribution rates will be going up by a not insignificant figure. We're in the difficult position here that the indications from GAD is the contribution rate's going to be going up, but it's not yet agreed. There are two significant reasons for that. One is the general underlying assumptions within the GAD valuation. So that's things like the SCAPE rate, the infamous SCAPE rate that you've probably heard of before, which is a technical rate used to value the fund. And the other one is O'Brien. So they are the two major causes of the rate going up. And because it hasn't been agreed yet, we also haven't had any confirmation of funding for those costs either. So we're in the rather unenviable position here now of having to consider a budget on the 15th of February or 12th of February at the Fire Authority, where we're going to have to assume that those costs are going to come through. We got no guarantee of funding, and we got no confirmation from Welsh Government or national government about whether that money's going to come. So we don't know whether the costs are going to come, and we don't know whether the funding for it is going to come, which is really unhelpful. But
Between a rock and a hard place.
yeah, that's the way we are. So I mean, you'll see that obviously when it comes to Fire Authority on the 12th of February when we do budget, you'll see that discussion take place in that forum.
So you'd be able to, that'll be brought to our next meeting in April now, will it? If we got
Fingers
any.
crossed.
Well, we should,
Fingers
I'm-
crossed.
fingers crossed, I'm hoping by the time Welsh Government set their budget in early March, they will know
Yeah.
whether or not it's going to happen and where the funding is coming from. So then we should have some certainty.
Fingers crossed then.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
Anybody want to
question?
ask a
Yes,
question?
please, sorry, Chair. Welsh Government is setting their budget in early March.
Yeah.
The meetings that take place beforehand, have they given any indication? What?
No, that's the
They're keeping
problem.
their powder dry.
That's the problem. I mean, you know, they are saying as much as they can in terms
Yeah.
of discussions that are ongoing and their expectations from those discussions. But clearly that, you know, we can't take decisions as a fire authority, and I can't
No.
set budgets on the basis of vague promises.
That's
So
right,
I
yes,
have
know,
to set them on the
understand
basis
that.
of what I know at that particular time. What we will be doing is asking for delegated authority to,
Okay,
for myself or my predecessor, is that the word? No,
no.
no, my successor. My successor to alter that budget if and when we get
Yeah.
confirmation of a different position.
Amend the budget.
Yeah, so,
Yes.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, it would be pretty impossible for my predecessor to change it, given his circumstances.
Oh, yes, you want to raise something?
So just to confirm that that's likely to affect employer contributions, not employee contributions.
Well,
Yeah, that's our understanding at the moment. The discussion is about
Yes, so
employer
okay.
only.
It's strange because a few years back, maybe 18 months back, the discussions were ongoing about a reduction in contributions based on the scheme not costing as much as expected. So
Yeah,
I can only assume that this MacLeod and O'Brien have increased those costs and they're being passed on now to scheme members or employers.
but there has been, I think there has been, as part of those discussions, there has been a discussion about the way the cap works, which is effectively what we're talking about. And I think, and I'm struggling here, but I think there have been some changes muted in the way the cap is accounting
Yes.
for those type of things. And I think the gist of it was trying to take a more long-term view of things so that things weren't going up and down all the time. But that discussion is going on in the background as part of this, Gareth, you're right. But there's nothing that we've seen yet which indicates that employee contributions are going to change up or down in the short term.
I'm not sure there's much scope for them to move that far. Aren't they 14%? Are they not limited at 15 or?
Well, I think that might be part of the overall conversation around the cap in terms of the way it works.
Yeah.
To put it in context, and again, this is not agreed, but to put it in context, the employer's rate is going up by 3.7%. That's not an increase of 3.7%. That's going up by 3.7% of pay. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's going up from around 27% to over 30, to around 31%. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of size of change we're talking about. So it's not insignificant in terms of a context.
happy days. Oh, thank you, Alice. We'll wait and see what happens. Unfortunately, none of us got crystal balls.
No, we haven't.
No. So, hope it'll be good news anyway. Anyway, move on to item number 8, which is the fire pensions, firefighter pensions, update on the current national exercising, which is MacLeod and O'Brien. So I think Alison will take us through that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, first thing to say, the report I've retained the standard format of this report, which members will recognise as sort of being iterating as we follow the journey of MacLeod in particular. So I propose the next update on this item will look quite differently. So we'll now move into almost a sort of project plan approach of how have we rectified the age discrimination elements of MacLeod. But for now, I think probably in terms of MacLeod itself, as we know, the legislation was laid on the 1st of October 2023. As Catherine has mentioned, we're now in the phase of processing all new retirement cases in line with the legislation. But of course, there's a huge piece of work to look back and correct past cases. And there is a set time frame that government have sort of published around the order of processing those cases. So Kim and the team and working closely with Catherine on that work. I've retained the appendix just to confirm the number of immediate detriment cases that we processed under McLeod, and for members, you will remember that we were one of the few fire and rescue services across the UK that's committed to processing these cases, and these were cases where employees were wanting to retire, but their notice in, but legislation wasn't laid, so we were processing them in terms of what we knew around what the legislation was likely to look like. So we processed 50 cases between October 21, when the Fire Authority approved the decision to process, and the end of September 23. So that closes off the immediate detriment phase, and we're now into processing cases in line with the new legislation and doing the back capture. I don't know if there's anything you want to say on this, Catherine, from a sort of RCT perspective, in terms of McLeod specifically.
Just on those immediate detriment cases, what we will, as part of that project plan, have to go back and review how benefits were paid on those 50 as well, to ensure that, as you said, we were expecting the legislation to look like X, but did that actually sort of pan through? So they, as well, are as part of that retrospective look back to recalculate benefits.
Brilliant, thank you.
Gareth?
Yeah, cheers. Thank you, Chair. It was only a quick one, and I think you've answered it really, in so much as I think I understand you to have said that we need to now kind of have a more action plan with timescales and stuff for maybe the next meeting. That's kind of where I was looking at. But also those kind of obligated timescales that have been put in place. Have we made an assessment about where we are realistically within working inside them, and also what sort of timescale are we looking at with regard to the category 2 cases, which are the people that have potentially been retired on a lower than they're entitled to pension for quite some time now?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. So we've shored up the pension team resource.
Yeah.
So we've got a temporary resource in there with prior pensions experience, so that's working out really well in terms of our administration and processing of all the cases. In terms of the category 2, and you're right, just to finish off the first bit, there has been a set, almost like a project plan that government have set out, which confirms the order of reviewing cases. So, for example, ill health retirement would be in the first 3 months, for example, and don't hold me to that, but that's how it looks. So for the next update, I propose that we share that project plan with board, and you scrutinise that sort of progress against that project plan. So I think we're comfortable that we've got the resources to do that, and we'll now put that into play and bring updates back to board. Catherine, anything more from your end? Is that sort of the plan from an RCT perspective?
Yeah, just to reiterate, now that we've got a lot of the HMRC tools that individuals need, that they are in place, GAD tax calculators for contributions, adjustments, etc. It really does feel now that we've now got the tools to be able to go forward. So I think our next step, along with our colleagues down in South Wales Fire, is literally to cohort everybody and literally work through, as you say, in priority order, using that government prioritisation as a guideline, and literally put everybody into a cohort and address how we're going to, because some of them are quite timely, that some of these calculations have got interest in them. So and interest is changing every month. So unless we get people coming back to us within a month, then we're recalculating. So we need to come up with a quite slick admin process around timing to avoid any further recalculations due to delays over that month. So yes, so I would agree with Alison that the next stage is to literally cohort everybody, and we start working through those cohorts with the deadline suggested.
Any other queries?
Just so it's likely then at the next meeting we'll have an outline of a time specified action plan.
Yes,
That's great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's fine. Well, the recommendation is that members note the report, the content of the report. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now we move on to item number 9, which is the which is a standard item on the publication updating information, which is quite a lengthy document.
Yes,
to
it
answer- To answer, to pick out the various points
Yeah.
that are necessary.
I'll probably counter through this one, but just to highlight a couple of things that I picked up as I was reading the documents. So I'll take you to, hopefully this is on your electronic version for those of you online. If you've got a hard copy, page 65, almost the top of that page with the heading disclosure requirements. And this sort of links to the Matthews project. So this is around when new legislation or regulations are put into place, there is an obligation on employers to notify members of the change in the rules and regs within 3 months. What I can assure members of is we've already started work on O'Brien. So this is the part-time regulations that affect our on-call staff. And we've already written out to those people who we believe are in scope and those who aren't in scope. So reading that update there in that publication, we've met the minimum 3 months or the 3 months notice of changes taking place. So I just thought it was useful to flag that because that is a requirement for us to undertake. Still on page 65, bottom of that page, age discrimination terminology. We use a lot of different titles for Matthews O'Brien, Sergeant McLeod, and I thought it was just useful to share that with you. So McLeod, as it says here, relates to the judge's discrimination case. Sergeant is that relates to the firefighters' discrimination case. So we talk about McLeod Sergeant, one is about judges, one is about firefighters. The other thing, just to flag while I've got the floor, Matthews is the term used for on-call firefighters in England, whereas O'Brien is the term used by Welsh Government for the Welsh Government legislation on those changes. So just thought I'd flag that.
Thank you.
Page 70, I picked up on inter-brigade transfers. So this is about concurrent service. So as it says, to remind FRAs that the scheme regs do not support aggregation of concurrent service. So recommend that when a firefighter is subject to an inter-brigade transfer, that there's a slick management of that transfer essentially. So just to flag that, because I know we have been talking about concurrent employment and service and what does that mean. That's an update that's just quite useful to be aware of for now. Page 70 also, there's something on annual allowance here. So following the spring budget, there were changes to the annual allowance. So there's a fact sheet link there, which is quite useful, particularly for rep bodies when they are receiving queries about this sort of stuff from members. Where am I going now? Page 73, annual benefit statements. So this is bottom of page 73, and Catherine may offer a comment on this, but just to flag with you that the pensions regulator is saying that given all the facts going on at the moment around McLeod, etc., that they will take a risk-based practical approach when reviewing, assessing and responding to annual benefit statement breaches. So I don't know, Catherine, from an RCT perspective, what your sort of reflection is of that statement? Helpful, I guess.
From our point of view, this for us is dependent on the data. So as long as we get the data in, and this is where the project plan comes into its own, and our software providers, but like I say, our software providers work on a national basis, so they will be working on allowing us, once we have got the data, to provide those remedial service statements, I'm sure within these deadlines. And with anything, we would always aim to hit deadlines rather than rely on any TPR sort of leniency for any 1 year. So the plan is at the moment that we would aim to hit all those deadlines, data dependent.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Page 75, top of the page, we talked about calculators earlier, and there's a lot of calculators floating around at the moment, but just to flag that HMRC have got a member calculator which focuses on payments. So I just thought about that.
I was going to speak about that because how difficult is it to use? Because not everybody is that IT.
Yeah, and we were chatting earlier, weren't we, Councillor Morgan, about a real life example where a member has a query and they're struggling to understand, you know, what the impact is.
Where can they go to get advice?
Yeah.
So I would certainly encourage members to talk to their unions and also come into our pensions team so that they can have some direct advice.
They're great at putting these things out. Half the time you look at it and you think, oh, good grief, I don't understand it.
Yes.
Sorry, Alison, could I come in on that?
Yes, of course.
I did exactly that with an example on last week, because like you say, it's all right having these calculators coming through, but it's the understanding. So I used a real life example and could follow it through. So it was quite straightforward. HMRC does tell you what you need before you go on to the calculator. And this is where we as administrators come in and provide what they call revised pension saving statements. So what we have to provide is the annual allowance position that people did have, and then the revised annual allowance position based on rollback. But the HMRC calculator tells you what you need before you start. So it's that information, your P60s, your self-assessment tax. So as long as somebody's kept all the records as they've gone through the taxation process over the last 3 years, a few years, sorry, then yeah, it should be pretty straightforward to use. We're trying to help people as much as we can. We're getting some queries. We're not tax advisors, but we can try and help people, and we are trying to help people as we get our heads around it as well as much as possible. But in some cases, I would recommend tax advisors just to be 100% certain for members.
Well, it was only really a statement that I'll try and form into a question more so, but was there ever any consideration along this journey with regard to McLeod of an obligation on the party that essentially breached the Equalities Act with the age discrimination, having to provide qualified financial advice? Because I know that in some of the complex areas of litigation that's been something that's been put in place for those members. A lot of people have got a lot of difficult decisions to make, haven't they? And it's not necessary that they're qualified to make those on their own. But was there ever a discussion about that?
I'm not aware, Gareth.
No.
I mean, I can pose the question to colleagues and see if there is anything available.
Because there's not much that we can provide as a union other than our advice in our circulars as such. But
yeah, I've never heard it discussed, and I've not even heard it discussed in the context of the compensatory arrangements either, because obviously that might have been where it would have come up as a conversation. Well, what if I've had to do this? But I've not even heard it discussed there. Because it is a bit of a challenge, obviously, because I think the view has always been that people's personal tax affairs are their own tax affairs, and they have obligation to sort them out, but appreciate where you're coming from.
It's not an easy area for ordinary people to be able to look at and understand straight away, is it?
No, and it's an area that likely if the age discrimination had not happened, then they wouldn't have these challenges in front of them. If you get me.
Can I answer a question of the young gentleman? Is there any help through the union if they come to you?
I don't think there is much qualified help. I mean, as a union, we certainly advise and provide information to our members, but it's a really we need to be certainly really careful that we never step over a line into
Yeah.
providing
that's right.
financial advice to somebody.
That's right. I understand
Because you could
that.
end up in trouble then.
Well, I can't financially advise someone, I'm not on financial
No.
advice.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
That is the challenge for all of us.
so
That's right.
we
It's
do
just
provide,
finding who to go to, isn't it? This
Yeah.
is the problem.
And not everybody keeps their documents for so many
That's
years. do
another
they?
thing.
No, it's difficult,
That's
isn't it?
another thing.
I'll pose the question to the LGA and see if there's
Any-
something available.
Okay.
Right, okay.
Okay, bottom of page 75, abolition of the lifetime allowance. There's a consultation response there, just for your awareness, more than anything at this point. Page, I'm going to flick through now, page 94 onwards. There's quite a lot in,
94?
yeah, 94. There's a
I was
lot.
just looking at the photograph of the pussy.
Oh. Yeah, that was feedback from the AGM, so I'll leave you read that. But 94 onwards, there's a whole bulletin relating to Matthews. Now, this is the English scheme reg, and it falls in Wales. It's called O'Brien, but it's not being laid until the 1st of Feb. It'll probably be quite similar, but I wouldn't propose at this point to go into that in too much detail, if at all. So just to share, just highlight that it is there, but there's a whole pretty much bulletin related to it. I think probably 108 next. 109 actually, pensions dashboard programme. Catherine's already mentioned the onboard into the pensions dashboard, which I think is now due for 2026. So that's just to highlight that one. 109 also, interesting updates on a bill to remove the lower earnings limit and to reduce the age for auto-enrolment. So halfway down the page, auto-enrolment bill gets royal assent. So I think that's one for us to watch and be aware of. A watching brief for us on that.
Yeah.
And then I think that's it. Pensions dashboard again throughout this, but I won't go to that one. So that's it as by way of a quick counter through some of the headlines in there.
Interesting by the time we.
They're actually quite helpful, I think,
It
the
is.
bulletins. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of reading, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody want to raise any issues on the rest of the document? No? No? No. Well, the recommendations that members review and local attached publications which are shared for information and awareness purposes. Agreed?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to item number 10, which is the pensions regulator returns. So I presume Alison is going to take us through this one.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. These are for your information as board members. I just need to flag a slight change to an entry in here, which is a board member that we'd assumed would be Gary Davis, but actually the individual replacing.
Which page is that?
So this is on page 143, but it's
Oh,
a
right, yeah.
theme throughout because
Yes.
we have to complete a return for each of the pension schemes. We thought Gary would replace Richard Prendergast, but DCFO Dowie Rose is now replacing Richard Prendergast. So there's no material change to the report. It's just the board member is different to what we had expected. These are for members' information. And what it does provide is sort of taking the first one, so the 92 scheme, so looking at page 139 and 140, it provides information around active members of that scheme, deferred and pensioners. It then confirms who the board members are, so each of the local pension board members, and then into record keeping. What it does there is it says what data has been assessed to be present and accurate. We've got a 99% accuracy rate in terms of the data. When did you last measure your scheme-specific data? November 23. And what percentage assessed to be present and accurate? 97%. So that format is standard for each of the schemes. So looking towards the, if I can find the next, not 2007, looking at 2015, I would suggest what you will see there is a higher number of active members. So looking at 2015 on page 162, so active members there, 1,217, deferred members 480, pensioner members 19. So you can see that there are now currently more active members in the 2015 scheme, which is right, and you would expect to see. And the same format applies. So accuracy of data on page 167 of that scheme, 98%, and scheme specific 96%. So those are there for your information. This is a requirement of us as a service to complete and submit. I don't think there's anything there that causes members or should cause members any concern. Happy to take any questions.
Sorry, just a point of detail out on page 147 where the auditors are named. It says Wales Audit Office. I think they're technically called Audit Wales now, and I think their address has changed as well. I think they've moved to Capital Quarter rather than I think they've given up Cathedral Road. So just to note that.
Thank you.
Nobody else wants to ask any questions? No? Okay. You finished with that then, have you?
Yeah.
Right, our recommendation is that we note the returns which are shared for information with Wales businesses. Right, we'll move on to item number 11, which is the internal audit reports and pensions.
Thank you.
Someone else is going to answer this as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to share this with members for assurance and awareness purposes. What you will see attached to the report is an assurance review of pensions completed by internal audit, and I just wanted to highlight some areas in the report for your awareness. So on page 178, on the top left of that page, there's a circle with an overall assessment of assurance, which is described as substantial assurance. The scope of the review itself was around the arrangements for managing and controlling the administration of pensions. And you can see the strategic findings on the top right box, basically confirm that, that there's nothing urgent, important or routine to come out of there in terms of recommendations. So the areas that the internal audit reviewed were the arrangements for the control of the administration of pension contributions and the interlink with RCT pensions. They looked at the processes around starters, leavers and post changes, and the monitoring and reporting processes. The areas of good practice identified were that there were detailed procedures in place for all steps involved in the management of pensions and the processing of contributions. There's a bit more detail within the report, but I just really wanted members to see that as by way of a sort of an assurance documentation and your awareness of the current pension service and provision being provided by the team and RCT as well.
Gavin?
Yeah, it was only a quick one, and thank you. It's an excellent report that to have 0 action points. It is assuring. Just, I suppose the question is, we're happy that, I don't know who's conducting this report, but we're happy that they're given a fair and scrutinise an assessment and that we're coming out, in good health. Yeah, we're happy
Yeah.
with that.
Absolutely. I don't know, Chris, if there's anything.
So it's the services contracted internal audit team.
Yeah.
So they're an external supplier
Brilliant.
who report in, and they are an experienced public sector
Thank you.
company. They're not kind of not used to doing pension type, local government type things. Yeah.
Nice to see a green light, isn't it?
It is. Can I just, at this paragraph here on 178, pensions change impact, the ultimate case, increased staff turnover, loss of expertise. That is a concern.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see how, I realise that.
Yeah, so this is one of our strategic risks around pensions. We regularly review this risk and we are monitoring our retirement profile. We're not currently seeing a spike in our normal retirement number. So at the moment, we're in a good place in terms of that, but we are constantly reviewing our numbers that people are opting out to leave the service.
That's probably way outside the scope of this conversation, but it just popped into my head. Are we seeing any evidence of an increase in people who are opting out of the pensions? I'm just thinking from the perspective of the cost of living crisis and difficult financial situations.
I don't think we are.
Specifically,
No.
because SABU, the Scheme Advisory Board, monitor those numbers across Wales.
Yeah.
And there's no significant, I mean, there always are numbers there,
Of course.
but there's no kind of sudden
Brilliant.
increases.
That's everything covered? That's it? Right.
Thank you.
So the recommendation that we review and note the contents of and review is as in Appendix 1. We have reviewed this, so I will note that we will move it.
Yeah, exactly that.
Well, yeah, that's fine. Okay, lovely, good, great. And then we got item number 12 is the forward programme for
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we've completed the work programme for the year.
Yeah.
And I think that concludes our meetings for the rest of this municipal year. So we look forward to seeing you in the next municipal year.
Yes. I hope we won't have anything very, very urgent.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Right then, right, item number 13 is to consider any items of business that the chairperson has deemed urgent at the part 1 or part 2. I have nothing. Oh, do you want, yes,
Yeah, sorry, I'll try and keep it brief. I've been approached by some scheme users who have raised some questions around historic service under the day crew in shift system and the pensionability for, I think I'm making a word up there, but I'll stick with it, pensionability of that service. I think originally it's come onto their horizon through discussions around O'Brien and information that we put out. I think they had considered that the time in the evenings and through the night when they were on call, that they were retained firefighters. But I think O'Brien is quite specific in that it doesn't deal with the day crewing system. But their argument or their assertions developed a little bit, and at times it can be quite compelling, where they're now pointing to a High Court judgment, Booth versus Mid and West Wales in 2019. Now, my understanding is the service have, or we, I suppose it's better phraseology, have had an IDRP raised in this sort of scope, and the judgment that we used to inform our position was Smith versus South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. The only thing is, the Booth versus Mid and West is much more recent in 2019, where Smith was 2011, and I suspect we use elements of the High Court judgment in Booth to inform our position on the pensionability of USAR and their contracts. But the Booth judgment dealt with 4 different areas, and where it dealt with day crewing was quite clear that it would be pensionable. I just wondered if we're at risk of being in an inconsistent position here or if we need to make sure that we're in a correct and consistent position. Just to add further, I think there's an LGA scheme advisory board briefing document, I suspect similar to the ones that we include in these papers, and I suspect was likely included in local pension board papers back in 2019, but it outlines this Booth decision, and it details 3 areas of work potentially for local pension boards. One, to consider whether duty systems in FPS 2006, FPS 215 should be made pensionable if not already done so under the day crewing. To consider whether duty systems of FPS 92 should be made pensionable, and consider whether there are historic mistakes that need correcting. I just wondered if maybe this is something we need to look at, or if that work was done, we've already done it. It would be really good to share with board members.
Yeah, happy to undertake a piece of work on this. What I do know in terms of having looked at Booth versus Mid and West is your description is right. The Pensions Ombudsman stated that in their decision it was not pensionable, but the High Court judge talked about it being pensionable. I think when we did an initial assessment of that, our day crewing system comprised components such as rental and light allowances, which when we mapped against the criteria set, didn't sort of indicated that they weren't pensionable payments. However, happy to have a look and to bring something back to board if that would work.
Yeah, I think that would be great from my perspective.
Thank you for that, Alison. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Any other queries now before? No? Nothing up there? No? Right. Anyway, thank you everybody for your attendance today, and look forward to seeing you next week. We're all going to go out with the weather now.